This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell & Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
Infrastructure matters to businesses.
Well, it's Infrastructure Week here at the Capitol Press Room.
Is it?
Well, we've decided that, yes.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out, and he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a podcast about power and politics in New York. And on this episode, we're exploring the power of the business community in the Empire State. The perception of employers, based on a survey from the Business Council of New York State, is that Albany lawmakers don't represent their interests and feel like this has contributed to a climate that is hostile to businesses. But how much of this is just sour grapes from not always getting their way, and how much is a response to one-party Democratic rule since 2019, which has shifted the focus of Albany to more of the perspective of labor? To make sense of how businesses navigate Albany and whether lawmakers are actually representing their interests, we're joined by former Democratic Assemblymember Ken Zebrowski, who is now a lobbyist with Brown Weinraub. Welcome back to the show, Assemblymember.
Great to be here, David.
So I've covered the Capitol closely for about a decade, and in that time, it seems like business groups spend more of their time during the legislative session playing defense when the legislature is running with the ball, so to speak, and to the extent that they play offense, it happens during the budget process when the governor is more in control. What do you think of that assessment? Is that fair?
I think it's somewhat fair. I think the agenda is many times defense. We have a legislature where there's 10,000 bills drafted in a 2-year cycle. It's probably creeping up towards 11 or more now.
We get to 20,000 if you count the redundancies, because there's this the bills in both houses. But yeah.
So there tends to be a good chunk of those that I think various businesses fear. Maybe not business community as a whole, but one sector or another sector, forcing them to do things or increasing their costs and fees and things like that. So, but there are offensive things, maybe more sector by sector than it is, an omnibus thing for everybody.
Well, it seems like the governor, though, with her executive proposal every year, tucks away a whole bunch of priorities for the business community, and ultimately they drop out. But to the extent that there is someone pushing the agenda, it seems like it is the governor in the context of the budget.
I don't know that I would totally agree with that. Maybe just because the governor is the entity into the division of budget that's, the steward of the entire economy in the state. And the legislature maybe just has a different mindset. But if you look at sort of the regionalization of the business community, different things are important to different regions, right? So if I think about the Capital District or Saratoga, the horse racing industry, or the nanotech or something like that, down by me in the Hudson Valley, you probably get legislators more, because of their model, focusing on the things that are regionally specific, where the governor's taking a holistic approach.
Well, if you had to rank the legs of the government, the governor, the assembly, the Senate, as business-friendly entities, at least as perceived by the business community's lobbyists, would it simply go governor 1, assembly 2, Senate 3?
Probably now, yes.
And you say probably now because, the dynamic was different when the Senate Republicans had the majority, or it's even been different since we've had one-party rule since 2019?
Yeah, when I say now, it depends upon, who's in the majority and who's in the governor's office. But I would say in general, the governor is probably perceived to be closer to the business community, or listening closer to the business community than the legislature in my time being up here.
It's pretty amusing that is the case, because I listen to conservative radio. I hear some people talk who aren't that involved in the day-to-day minutia of state government, and I don't think they realize what a good ally they have in this governor compared to the legislature. I mean, what this state would look like if, for example, the state Senate Democrats were running the show would be probably different than what we have now.
There is a disconnect out there right now, and I think it's our political bubble or whatever, and you see this playing out in a variety of ways. You see it playing out, I think, right now with the environmental community. You got the governor being, featured as a environmental champion, I think it was in Time magazine, and at the same time, you've got a handful of environmental activist groups, endorsing against her, and I think people are missing the forest for the trees, right? You see it with tax policy sometimes. You would listen to some groups and you would think we are in Arkansas. The fact of the matter is we have an enormously progressive tax code right now. So if you want to change that, as some groups are out there trying to change that, you are taking New York well out of the mainstream of state policy, right? You'd be, attempting to try something that has never been done by any state. Yet the rhetoric is as if tax the rich, right now we're taxing, folks lower the lower end of the economic spectrum more than the rich. So it's always funny to see the rhetoric, but I guess that's just, where we are in the advocacy or political environment right now.
So what do you think of the idea that the effectiveness of a business group is contingent on who their partner is for any specific issue? For example, you get the AFL-CIO on board, and you can pay off the unemployment debt. You've got 1199 on board, and the hospitals can get whatever they want. I mean, do you think as a standalone force, business interests are that powerful in Albany, or is their power contingent on who they can put together in a coalition?
It's tough to sit here and rank things, but certainly if you're able to get labor and business on the same page, that's a force to be reckoned with, and probably something you're going to get through.
Because when they're opposed, nothing happens. Because I think of something like the scaffold law. The business groups would sell off their mother to get some reforms in the scaffold law, but labor doesn't want to do anything on that, and thus the status quo holds.
Yeah, isn't that our system?
Well, our system would be a majority rules, and so I don't know if it's 50-50 split, though.
No, but on a big issue like that, it's tough to parse through and to change a major policy that's been involved for, I think, 100 years or so, right, with the scaffold law. So
I have no idea. And it feels like 100 years.
The businesses, at the end of the day, the businesses care about that issue because of insurance costs. So in trying to reduce, everybody talks about overall costs, but when you try to drill down to exactly what is increasing costs on business, it's there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's some. So, yeah, something like that is very difficult to solve. But, the UI was a great example, I think, of a major business win. And to the extent that there were additional partners to get it through, I just think that's like politics 101.
I think we disagree, though, on why this got done, because I would argue that Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie doesn't bring this up in his opening remarks at the legislative session, if not for the AFL-CIO saying this is a priority for us now because, oh, by the way, we can't increase unemployment benefits unless we pay this debt off.
Well, I'm not going to get into the speech making of the speaker. I wasn't in that room, but I can tell you that there were a good chunk of legislators that were bringing up the UI. At what point it becomes a critical mass to becoming a priority of the legislature is a moving target sometimes. But, that's true. Like, you can't increase unemployment benefits and still have this major debt out there. But I just don't think that that's unique. I think, any single issue you're trying to bring as many people into it as possible to influence public policy, and you're also trying to, get legislators to care because it's affecting somebody in their district or a constituency they care about.
Well, how do you get lawmakers to care? Because on something like the scaffold law, business interests can jump up and down and scream. They can say, here's the latest chart that explains why this is driving up. They can bring in people who have been, say, filmed doing fraudulent stuff, and it doesn't change hearts and minds. So on those issues where maybe you can move the needle, is it about the messenger? Is it about the framing of the message? Because obviously for some people, just getting a memo of opposition or support from the business council is not going to cut it.
It's a little bit of all of the above. I'm not trying to not answer the question, but when you're looking at an issue, number one, you have to get people to care about it. So the framing of the issue is important. They need to understand why something is a problem. Second of all, they need to understand our system is set up so legislators come from an individual area. So you always want to bring it home to how it's affecting somebody in their district, to the extent that you can connect it to somebody in particular, right? If you're the business council, and legislators live in their districts like anybody else. So the extent that they're walking into their liquor store or their pizza parlor or being visited by a major employer that's taking them on a tour and saying this is how it affects X, Y, and Z, that's when you're going to get the most bang for your buck. The business council, it represents a bunch of businesses, and those bunch of businesses are taxpayers and employers in somebody's district. So you got to bring it home for them.
Are some lawmakers, though, essentially an immovable force? Maybe they have a perspective given who their constituency is, given their own personal experience, or maybe things they've witnessed here at the Capitol, and they say, great, I don't care what your argument is. You've got enough people going to bat for you because you're a big company or whatever reason, and thus I'm holding the line. Do you think that accounts for a significant or even a meaningful portion of the lawmakers here?
I don't know what the number is, but I do think...
But you encounter it.
What do you... Oh.
You've encountered that when you were in the legislature. I have to imagine there were times where you were working with colleagues and they simply said, no, I don't move on this issue, or I don't trust this big business, or I've viewed this issue one way. It doesn't matter how they sell it.
Yes, to the extent that I think either philosophically they don't believe in the issue, then fine, yeah, they're not movable. But I certainly think there's some folks out there that aren't going to expend any time or energy or bandwidth focusing on an issue that's being brought to them, by business, which is a shame because, business at the end of the day is an economic driver. There's no other doubt about it. Folks need jobs, all the services need taxpayers, etc. But I don't think it's like a critical mass. And honestly, I can't even think of somebody in my head right now that would not be open to a discussion. I think for the most part, our legislators are open to a discussion, but sometimes maybe it's that bandwidth issue. It's like, yeah, I get it, but it's not going to be a priority for me.
From your perspective on the inside, when you were an assembly member, did you have a sense of which business interests were the best represented in Albany? Because we often hear things framed as the little guys, the pizza pies, the mom and pop business stores, but they're not the ones with teams of lobbyists here in Albany. It seems like the interest groups that are best represented are, I think about the gambling operators, which have multiple teams working on them, and other sorts of businesses that are bringing in millions in dollars in revenue. I mean, is that a fair assessment from little old me?
Sorry, what's the assessment? That
when we talk about who's got the power here in Albany, whose voices are even the ones being amplified when we think about the business interests, it's large corporations. It's not the so-and-so son's repair shop because they can't afford to lobby.
Depends on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a broad business economic type issue, then yeah, maybe some of the biggest businesses are carrying the water and they have the most to lose or to gain. I mean, take UI. Our biggest businesses pay the most. But at the end of the day, mom and pop shops were paying more in unemployment insurance, didn't have weren't hiring lobbyists and things like that, but were sort of benefiting from that. Or is it like an industry specific type thing? Like like in the tech world or something like that. But then there isn't a lot of mom and pop. So, business is
not according to the Chamber of Progress, because we've got those upstarts that were, going to help kill with the Raise Act and whatever other regulation we're going to put across.
Yeah, well, there are some, and I guess I can think of some projects that I've worked on where they're newer type of technologies, maybe AI type technologies, and they're not the Googles of the world or NVIDIA or something like that. But or is it is it something like so incredibly specific? When I was a legislator, when I think of the things that I would work on, a lot of times it would be like, I'll give you an example, like of a the brew pub industry. Really, it was a brew pub in my district that came in and said, hey, the number of barrels we can sell at retail for our license makes it that it's not worth it for us to invest. You should increase that. And we ended up doing it over a number of years, and they've opened up a new facility in Rockland. I mean, that's the type of thing I think if I shut my door and said, hey, nobody's going to care about that. What a shame that would be. That's like the core of my job, right? Business walks in, tells me about a regulation. We fix it over a couple of years. They expand and hopefully employ more people. So,
well, I guess I think about it in the context of an issue that we covered earlier this year with NFIB, which was trying to do away with credit card processing fees on taxes and tips. So if I'm a restaurant, I love this, and we have a huge, restaurant industry in New York. Credit card companies obviously don't like this, and they threatened to come on the show, and then when they actually got an invite, they declined to come on the show. So, I mean, that speaks to sort of the differing business interests and who's got, whose ear, because that bill never moved. And it just makes me wonder, where is the business interest that's driving things, and who is speaking up for the mom and pop restaurants, so to speak, when they do have an issue like credit card fees on taxes and tips?
The credit card fee issue, I think, is a good example of where you have small businesses, you have consumers,
sure,
which aren't necessarily. I remember getting involved in that issue when I was a legislator, and my first thought was, all these businesses I'm walking into suddenly have a 3% fee on everything. It's like a really interesting issue because it's all these sort of competing interests. It's really tough for me to drill down for you today and say, like, hey, here is the definition of business interest or, business influence up here at the Capitol. It's very dispersed.
What do you think is an issue that might get traction in 2026 where the business community, which, as we just said, is a nebulous and moving target, could actually bring home a win, as opposed to not just winning on defense by blocking single-use plastics EPR for the umpteenth year in a row? What's a win that you think they might actually be able to get based on whatever is happening federally or in the economy, or based on the makeup of this legislature and this governor heading into an election year?
I'm trying to think something broad. There's certainly, if we went industry by industry, there's things that people care about. But I think from an economic development perspective, different tax credits and things that the governor can propose or hopefully will propose sound pretty dry, but to the extent that they drive investments in parts of the state that there isn't, and set up sort of like an ecosystem or of an infrastructure. That's why it's so important, some of the things, that are happening with, the chip investments and things like that, because it is sort of like a cascading of effect of major businesses moving into an area like that. So when I think of something that could unite the business community as a whole, which isn't, reducing a mandate or reducing taxes, which obviously they would support, some of these sort of like targeted business tax credits and things that drive private dollars into, parts of the state that hopefully have a compounding effect.
But that is what we've seen for years when we talk about what can the business group get out of this legislative session or budget. I mean, that's not new. It's, okay, we've got more money for the film tax credit. We've got a new tax-free New York program. That seems like it's the status quo, which suggests to me that you don't really think that this is going to be a legislative session where we see any big groundswell or movement on mandates or broader tax reform.
No, but those things, first of all, there are things other states are doing that we're not doing here, or things that, have expired but need to be, perhaps renewed. We talk about credits like a rural tax credit, or, figuring out how to invest money in different parts of the state. You see things that over the years have been created, like the independent media thing or the theaters and those type of things. To the extent that some of our major, corridors and things like that can be improved to help with truck traffic or help with our supply chain, those are the type of business things that I think could be helpful. Otherwise, I think you have to bring up industry-specific things. This industry cares about this industry cares about that. If you're talking about overall, maybe it's a little bit of defense, but you see some of the decisions that are being made recently. I think are a realism of where we are in terms of our energy consumption vis-a-vis where some of the regulations and the laws have gone.
Well, we did not mention the possibility of changing the corporate tax code in 2026, which by all accounts is one of those possibilities on the table right now, and also speaks to one of those issues where the business community should probably be divided, because this is not something that impacts businesses equally. So is that something that you think will then present a problem for the business community, because maybe they can't uniformly get behind an opposition to it, that there might be players that progressive taxation supporters might be able to pull off and say, hey, we've got this retail group that's for this. We've got this mom and pop group that's in support of this, and therefore they're able to get some sort of corporate tax changes through in 2026?
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out, but I'm sure that will be the plan for those that are pushing that. I laugh at the corporate tax because
you laugh in its face.
Well, I just we found one thing where New York may be below the average compared to other folks, but certainly we make up the cost of doing business in a variety of other ways. I'm not somebody that is here to say that New York's business environment is just flat out terrible. We have a lot going for us in New York. There's a reason why you come into New York, whether it's in New York City, where I live in Rockland County, or other parts of the state, and see investments and see vibrant downtowns. There are certain places which are struggling more than others, and we've got to figure out programs that go there. But I like to say that in my hometown of Clarkstown, you can still go and find a cobbler to fix your shoes. I give that example because that's not everywhere, right? We have an economy locally that maintains a service like that is so specific.
I thought you'd say it was a shoe fetish community or something like that.
In a day and age where some communities have been, shrinking to just Walmarts and some of the bigger chains and things like that. So I'm not somebody like that's saying the sky is all falling and all is bad. But at the same time, we have to recognize that New York, by any independent metrics, is a high tax state, and one that is tougher to do business in than other states. There's a balance. There's a balance in all of these things. But increasing the corporate tax and acting like it's just it's out there and it's a gift, I just think is it's missing the forest.
Well, finally, as listeners know, you are a former Rockland County lawmaker, and I'm curious, given the fact that we're going to have Metro North serving the capital region in the future, and now there are some sort of conspiracy theories about this is the governor's way to expand the payroll mobility tax to the capital region, is part of you kind of being like, yes, enjoy the pain? Is there a certain amount of schadenfreude that you're like, I hope this happens. I hope we expand this to the capital region, and they can understand what the heck we were talking about in Rockland County and Orange County, et cetera, when we were complaining about this?
I hadn't thought about that aspect, so let me do it now live. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you get Metro North up here, you will be able to get easier onto Metro North and get into the city on a one train than I will be, 26 miles from Yankee Stadium.
And that's not a personal thing about you. This isn't like Ken Zebrowski's not allowed to ride the train.
Right. West side of the Hudson does not have an ability to get onto one train and get over. We got to go down into New Jersey and hop over. But sure, I'm happy Metro North is coming over here. I won't be taking it because I'd have to drive across the bridge, get on in Tarrytown, I guess, or White Plains, or drive north and then across. By the time I do any of that, I might as well just drive the 127 miles in an hour and 54 minutes and just get here like I do today.
Well, we've been speaking with public transit expert and former Assembly member Ken Zebrowski. He's now a lobbyist with Brown Weinraub. Assembly member, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Always love coming on the program.
For more than 100 years, the New York State Association of Counties has served as the united voice of New York's county leaders, fostering excellence in county government and advocating for sustainable funding and sensible legislation that protects local taxpayers and the essential services they rely on. Learn more at nysac.org. And we're back with Working Rules, and we're going to share a little leftover content from an interview we had earlier this month with Patrick Mannion, a Board of Regents member from Central New York, who weighed in on some of the historic tension between the governor's office and the state education department. You alluded to the fact that governors do not have control over the department. They can influence the department in part with, say, the control over the purse strings. But what do you think are the pros and cons of the current structure? And would there be a benefit to having this more akin to other state agencies like the Department of Labor or the Department of Health, where this was essentially directly under the control of the governor?
Not that that's a loaded question.
You're a communications professional. You can navigate it.
Well, I'll answer it the way I answer it because I do get asked that question a number of times. I've known every governor from Hugh Carey on.
Wow.
And
you look great.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
You must have been a child when you met Hugh Carey.
They didn't necessarily beat me up.
Okay.
But,
well, it was more of an age joke.
I get it. No, I get it. I was a much younger person back then. Governors like control. That's part of the business, right? They run to be the executive, and they look to have the entire apparatus at their disposal. Some governors are really good at it. Some governors are just okay. Most governors figure out a way to deal with whatever power they have in a productive way. My view of state education is it's been this way since the beginning. It's managed to make it 250 years, plus or minus.
So do cockroaches, though, right?
Cockroaches are a great source of protein. What do you want me to say? I wouldn't say that we're the cockroaches of government. I would say that there is something to be said for a tradition that has been established and been effective. And that's my view of the department. I certainly recognize the governor's desire to have more control. And I'm not so sure, I can't speak for the governor, obviously, but I'm not so sure the governors would come right out and say, hey, I want the whole thing to report directly to me. But, if you have a cabinet and you have 11 seats and you need one more to get everything, then you'd want to have 12 seats. So I understand that. But I do think it works the way it is. I do think that the oversight of the Board of Regents with the commissioner and the chancellor is appropriate. I do think the purse strings are still controlled across the street, as they like to say. So between the governor's office and the Assembly and the Senate, that's who makes the final enabling decisions with where and how the money comes over. So I'm happy with the way it is. I think it works, and understanding there are alternative views. And I don't know that anybody would point to it and say it doesn't work. It just, if you're the executive, you would probably say, that would be better if I had it.
It's actually New Jersey Transit that services my neck of the woods in Rockland and Orange
They
County.
might as well just annex you.
No,